Manchester United had become the first English team to play in Europe, a new world for supporters and players.
Europe was different. It was an adventure. It was sort of representing the country. It was just paradise, it was.
For atmosphere, you could cut it with a knife.
Manchester's Violet goes through and it's a goal.
Every young kid at that time wanted to look like David Pegg.
They used to do the best they could to pick up any of the birds that were around, you know. Actually, they were quite successful most of the time.
They were good pals, good pals.
We virtually willed them. Everybody willed them to score. Most players want to play against the best.
The idea of being able to see other famous cities and to be covered in football, you couldn't ask for a better job than that. We're just happy trundling along the runway and just straight up between the two things. Way, lads, we've made it.
I've got a photograph of him sweeping ice off the aeroplane.
In 1957, United won the league championship for the second successive year. The Busby Babes had learned from that first season in Europe. They had lost in the semi-final to a tactically superior Real Madrid, but this time it would be different. A swashbuckling win at Arsenal was the last game before the quarter-final in Belgrade. Tom Potter was the local bobby around Old Trafford. He met the club secretary just before the team flew out.
On the Sunday evening, I was on duty in Warwick Road. I was looking down the ground and I saw Walter Crickmere and his wife, and they were just coming out of the players' entrance. And I said, a good match yesterday, Mr. Crickmere. He said, yes. He said, Bobby Charlton played brilliantly. He said, they won 5-4, you know, at Arsenal the day before. And he was overjoyed about this. So he said, what are you doing on Thursday? I said, oh, I think I'm on duty just the same. He said, well, if you're anywhere near the ground, about 4 o'clock, you'll see the plane coming home then.
You were going places where people couldn't go in those days, behind the Iron Curtain. And the team that went to Yugoslavia, each player, whether he be going from his own home or from his digs, would have maybe a dozen hard-boiled eggs. Crazy when you think about it. A dozen hard-boiled eggs, sandwiches, cheese.
People brought little stoves with them, chocolates, anything to eat, you know, something that they could knock together quickly. And really the food wasn't too bad at all, really. It was okay. We always got the best of everything wherever we went. It doesn't matter which country we went to.
You would think it was a Hollywood film stars arriving, and they were absolutely captivated by it all, and they enjoyed the Manchester United style of play. They were 3 up at half-time, and they should have cakewalked it, but they decided to keep on attacking, and of course if you do that, you leave gaps at the back. They got one, and then they got a lucky penalty when Fulks struck for the ball, but the guy fell over his leg, and it's a penalty. In the modern context, you would have criticised Man United for throwing away a 3-goal lead. But they had this kind of arrogance. They went out to score goals. And that's not a bad thing, is it, really, from the spectator's point of view?
After the match, you know, the perk that you had was you were allowed to have a drink after the game, and we used to have a few drinks. We used to have more than enough drinks, I must be honest.
We went to a banquet. I remember big Mark Jones singing, and everybody putting their arms around each other, and these poor Slavs watching on Ilkley Moor, but Tat Neri was at the top of his voice, him, Tommy Taylor and David Pegg, on Ilkley Moor Batat until about 1 o'clock in the morning. The players went back to the hotel, played poker in this big hotel where you put your shoes outside the door for the man to come along and polish your shoes. You've really made it then. But little Eddie Coleman was going along, changing a 7 for an 8 and changing people's shoes, and until somebody said, that's the boss's shoes you're moving. I can assure you, put them back again.
They chartered this Elizabethan because on the previous match in Prague, the British planes couldn't leave Heathrow. They flew, as I remember, to Vienna, and then Vienna into Holland, and then by cross-channel steamer, and then by train to Manchester, you see. And Busby said, we're not having that. Next time we'll have our own plane.
It was cold on that Thursday afternoon, and I saw a couple of the reserve team lads running down to the ground, and Joe Carolyn was one of them, the full-back. And I thought they were making their way to the ground to watch this plane come and go. And I'm looking up in the sky, and a black cab driver drew up. He said, what are you looking for, mate? I said, the plane's coming over. And he said, 4 o'clock. He said, not today, it ain't. They've crashed. He said, they've all been killed.
On the fringe of a Munich airport lies the wreckage of an airliner, still smouldering from a crash in which 21 people were killed.
I just turned like that and I saw the end of the runway. God, you know, we're not going to make it.
Terrible rattling and crashing. Bang, and something hit me in the back of the head. I thought the top of my head's been cut off. Something went up my nose. And I actually thought that like an eggshell, like a boiled egg, had taken the top of my head off.
When I came round, I couldn't breathe like this, and I'd always had a good breathing, you know, and I thought, what a silly bloody way to die.
And they shouted, run. And just as they shouted, run, Jim Thane, Captain Jim Thane, came around what was left on one side of the cockpit with a fire extinguisher in his hand. And he shouted, run, you stupid bastard, it's going to blow.
And I ran. And I realised I had no shoes on, running in about 3 or 4 feet of snow. Then I saw what had happened.
Then I heard a child crying, and I knew that behind Frank Taylor there was a lady and a child there. And I shouted to the people, come back, there's people alive in here. They just kept going. Eventually I shouted, come back, you bastards, there's people alive in here. I don't blame them.
And then I looked down and saw my right leg was in a bit of disarray, and I did the only gentlemanly thing, I passed out.
I found a little bunny suit or romper suit which the child had been wearing. I seen it, pulled it out, and there was nothing in it. Thank God, I was relieved. Crawled a bit further and found the baby.
And then I saw Harry coming around the other side of the aircraft with a baby. I didn't know there was a baby on board.
Manchester United, the finest soccer team Britain has produced since the war. And 7 of them died in the crash. 10 others, as well as their famous manager, Matt Busby, were injured. Some so seriously that their lives hung in the balance.
I asked the doctor, where's everybody else? There didn't seem too many of them, you know. Are they in the other hospital? He said, no, we don't have another hospital. This is it, this is what you have left. Everybody else is dead, he said. Well, the shock hit me then. That's the first time it hit me, you know.
With them were 8 of the North's finest sporting journalists who would never see home again.
I said, where's George and Henry, all my lads? And he just pointed upstairs. He said, they're up there, you know. And I thought he meant on the second floor, the floor above me. But he meant they were in heaven.
We're walking down the street and a newspaper lad said, United in plane crash. They didn't announce anything properly. It was just there are survivors that are injured in hospital.
I happened to notice on the hoarding, Munich air crash. And that's all it said, Munich air crash. And I thought, goodness me, what's happened? Got back to the office, and it was just as if the atom bomb had dropped.
This reporter came from the local paper and told us that there'd been an accident, but didn't say what kind of an accident, just that he'd had a report that there had been an accident, and we actually assumed that he'd had an accident in his car. And then, of course, we watched television and heard it on the radio.
And as the night went on, they started mentioning survivors. And I can remember saying, thank God that Bobby's all right, Dennis and Harry and Bill Folks and all these, thank God Jackie, but all the names, they only mentioned it. And I said, now where are my friends? Where are they?
According to my mother, I was apple of his eye, you know what I mean? He were
Nice, man. I do believe she was shopping when I think she saw it on her a news board. I do believe that's how she found out. Like, but,
During the late evening, they reported that a lot of them had been found. And so we were quite hopeful. But then early next morning, about 6:30, they told us that David hadn't been.
It was as if somebody had thrown a great grey blanket over the city. It wasn't just Manchester United that had been struck down. We'd been struck down. It was part of our family. We'd been bereaved.
You was walking round like in a dream. You couldn't believe that this had happened. You know, all these great players that we'd worshipped, idolised, and all this has now come to an end.
There wasn't a hysteria or anything like that. It was just a quiet sadness. And the school was never so quiet. You know, you'd hardly hear a sound in the school that day. They were all wearing their scarves, and we thought, well, we let them wear them, you know, for the day anyway, even though they weren't uniform, because they were so genuinely upset that they came in quietly into school. They went home quietly. Everyone felt it was a personal loss.
Wasn't a sound, you know. Grown men were crying as the hearse was going by with these coffins in, and there wasn't a sound except the wheels on the road. That night, another constable and I were designated to perform duties inside the ground, and the bodies, of course, were in the gymnasium. And I didn't want to look, and yet I did look, and I cried, you know, and the other constable with me as well, he was terribly upset. And all night long, you know, we could hear people coming to the door with flowers and crying outside the place entrance door and saying prayers. All night long we could hear footsteps. Very, very sad. And I was glad when morning came. The smell of the varnish from these coffins, and it's with me till the day I die. Each time I smell varnish, it takes me back to these coffins.
I was going to Belgrade, and there was a visa stamped in my passport. And Jimmy Murphy came, pulled me to one side, and he said, "Ronnie, the boss has just been on the phone. Roger Byrne has a slight injury. He's very sorry, but Jeff Bent will take your place." Of course, I wasn't very happy, as you can imagine, because for a young player to go on a tour was fantastic with the first team. So that was that. And poor old Jeff never came back.